all basically trust what feels real, right? What we can touch, see, experience every day. But for ages, thinkers have kicked around this really wild idea.
Yeah.
What if none of this is actually the base reality? What if it's all just an incredibly detailed simulation?
Yeah, the simulation hypothesis, it pops up everywhere from like ancient philosophy to the Matrix.
And serious academic work, too, like Nick Bostrom's stuff. It has this long, fascinating history.
It's definitely one of those concepts that makes you stop and just think differently about everything. The scale of it is kind of mind-boggling.
Absolutely. And look, while it can often feel like just pure speculation, today we're doing a deep dive into some really interesting recent research that suggests maybe, just maybe, there's a tangible scientific way to actually probe this idea.
And the key connection they're looking at is gravity.
Right. Something we experience constantly.
And the truly fascinating part here is the suggestion that gravity, this force we've always thought of as fundamental, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's actually a result of something deeper, like a kind of optimization happening within the universe.
Or within the simulation running it all.
Potentially.
Yeah.
A way the system manages information, keeps things efficient.
Exactly. And the physicist pushing this forward is Dr. Melvin Vopson over at the University of Portsmouth. Now, here's a bit of a surprise. Dr. Vopson's background isn't what you might expect, like theoretical cosmology or something.
Right.
He actually comes from condensed matter physics and, get this, digital data storage. He worked at Seagate.
Wow, okay, that's unexpected.
It is. And it's this really unusual path that seems to have led him to explore this profound link, between information, physics, and maybe the very fabric of reality itself.
That's a great example, actually, of how insights from different fields can suddenly connect. His background in data storage, it gives him a really unique lens to view the universe, doesn't it? Thinking about information density and efficiency.
For sure. So that's our mission for this deep dive, to really unpack Dr. Vopson's theory. We want to explore the core ideas he's working with and try to get our heads around what this view of gravity might actually imply about, well, everything. Okay, so let's start with a foundational concept, information entropy.
Okay, so entropy in general, the basics. It's just a measure of disorder, right?
Like my teenager's bedroom, high entropy.
Exactly. That's the classic example. Toys everywhere, maximum disorder. And you tidy it up, everything in its place that's low entropy. Now, information entropy applies a similar idea, but to the information needed to describe a system.
Meaning like the position and speed of every particle in a box, that kind of thing?
Precisely. All the data points needed to fully specify its state. And a key part of Vopson's work is pointing out that this information isn't just abstract. It has, believe it or not, a tiny, tiny but measurable mass.
Whoa, okay. Information has mass. That's big.
It is. And building on that, Vopson's main element is this. When gravity pulls things together, stars forming, galaxies, planets forming, the information entropy of that system goes down. It decreases.
So it becomes more orderly, informationally speaking. It takes less information to describe one big clump than lots of scattered bits.
You got it. It's like the universe is tidying up its own information, making it more compact, more efficient to describe.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does this fit into his bigger picture? You mentioned his mass energy information equivalence principle.
Right. That was back in 2019. The core idea there is that mass, energy, and information aren't really separate things. They're more like different forms of the same underlying stuff, like water can be ice, liquid, or steam, but it's all still H2O.
I see. Different manifestations.
And then building on that, in 2022, he proposed his second law of infodynamics.
Okay, now this sounds really interesting because doesn't it kind of clash with one of the most basic laws we know, the second law of thermodynamics?
It certainly seems to on the surface. The second law of thermodynamics, as you know, says that overall entropy disorder in a closed system always tends to increase over time. Things naturally get messier.
Right. The universe tends towards heat death, maximum entropy.
But Vopson's second law of infodynamics proposes the opposite for information entropy. It suggests that information entropy naturally tends to decrease over time, or at least stay constant.
Decrease? Why would it do that?
Well, the thinking is efficiency. A state with lower information entropy requires less computational power, less data storage, effectively, to describe or simulate.
Like optimizing code to make it run faster and use less memory.
Exactly like that. A universal tendency towards informational efficiency.
Okay, proposing a new fundamental law like that, that's pretty bold.
Oh, absolutely. And Vopson acknowledges that. But it wasn't purely theoretical speculation. He actually looked for evidence.
And found some.
Well, he found some intriguing preliminary evidence in a place you might not expect. The genetic mutations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
The COVID virus, how does that connect?
What he did was analyze the information entropy of the virus's genome as it mutated. His analysis suggested that, over time, the mutations tended towards states with lower information entropy.
Huh. So if you're thinking in simulation terms.
Right. If you were thinking in those terms, you could interpret that as the simulation maybe optimizing the virus's code, making it more informationally streamlined. Is a provocative finding for sure.
Definitely provocative. Okay, so we have information having mass, this drive towards lower information entropy. Let's connect it directly to gravity now. This idea of entropic gravity, it didn't start with Vopson, did it? We should probably mention Eric Verlinde.
Absolutely, yeah. Verlinde's work back around 2011 was really influential. His concept of entropic gravity basically proposed that gravity isn't fundamental either. He suggested it emerges from deeper processes related to information, specifically information encoded on sort of holographic surfaces.
Okay, so Verlinde opened that door. How does Vopson's approach differ? What's his specific contribution in his latest paper?
So Vopson's paper, the one in AIP Advances from April 2025, takes that idea but gives it a different engine, you could say.
Yeah.
He proposes that gravity itself is the actual mechanism driving this reduction in information entropy. It's the universe's tool for information optimization.
Ah, okay. So not just emerging from information processes, but actively driving the reduction of information entropy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And crucially, he manages to derive Newton's law of gravity, the classic FGMMR2, directly from his principles of information dynamics and that second law of infodynamics.
Wow, okay.
So while it shares the entropic gravity label with Verlinde in the sense that gravity isn't fundamental, the underlying mechanism and the principles used are quite different.
Fascinating. How does he actually make that derivation? What are the steps connecting information rules to the force of gravity?
Okay, well, he starts with an assumption that's actually got some backing from quantum mechanics, thinking about the Planck scale.
Yeah.
The idea that space-time isn't perfectly smooth, but actually discrete. Like it's made of tiny, fundamental units, almost like pixels or a computational grid.
A mesh, okay.
Right. And he treats space itself as a kind of information storage medium. Each tiny Planck-sized cell registers the properties of any matter within it.
Got it. Storing the data.
Then he brings in his second law of infodynamics that drive for the system's information entropy to decrease. And in this picture, gravity just naturally emerges as the force that makes this happen. It compels matter to clump together.
Because clumping reduces the information needed.
Precisely. Think about describing the positions of a billion stars. If they're scattered randomly, you need loads of data. If they're clumped into one galaxy, you need much less information to specify their general location and distribution. It's more compact informationally.
Okay, that clicks. It really is like data compression, but on a cosmic scale.
That's a great way to put it, cosmic data compression. And mathematically, he brings together several concepts to show this. Things like Shannon's information entropy, the Boltzmann constant, a notion of temperature derived from his mass-energy information equivalence, and quantum properties like the reduced Compton wavelength. He weaves these together within this information framework, and out pops Newton's law of gravity.
That's genuinely remarkable. Deriving something so foundational like Newtonian gravity from pure information principles. And you mentioned a key difference from Verlinde's work again. Can you just pin that down for us?
Sure. The main distinction is really about why the entropic force manifests and what the entropy is doing. Verlinde's original idea often involves entropy increasing on holographic screens, sort of related to thermodynamics. Vopson, however, grounds his argument firmly in his second law of infodynamics and the mass-energy information equivalence. For him, the fundamental drive is for information entropy to decrease, and gravity is the way the universe achieves that decrease. Those specific principles weren't in Verlinde's initial formulation.
Right, so similar outcome, emergent gravity, but a very different proposed mechanism and driving principle. Decrease versus increase of entropy, in a way.
In a nutshell, yeah. Vopson's is specifically about minimizing information.
Okay, so this is obviously a huge theoretical leap. If Vopson's ideas gain traction, what are some of the potential big picture implications?
Well, according to Vopson himself, in his paper, he suggests that this could offer completely new ways to think about some of the biggest puzzles in physics today.
Like what?
Things like dark energy, what's driving the universe's accelerating expansion, also the search for quantum gravity, that unified theory of everything, and even understanding black holes better, like the information paradox.
So potentially unlocking doors in some really fundamental areas.
It offers a new lens, absolutely, a potentially powerful one if it holds up.
But it's crucial to stress it, and he stresses this too, right? These are still very much theoretical ideas at this stage.
Oh, completely. He's very clear about that. He emphasizes that this is a proposal, and he actively wants the scientific community to scrutinize it, debate it, test it. He actually said something like, it's a public duty to publish results, so we can debate them, so we can disprove them. Which really highlights, the proper scientific attitude.
Yeah, that's good science. Put it out there, let people challenge it.
Exactly.
So what's next? Where does the research go from here based on this paper?
Well, he points towards several paths. Refining the theoretical framework itself, making it more robust. Also exploring how it fits within more complex situations, like in general relativity or deep quantum regimes. And the biggest challenge, of course, is figuring out if there are any ways to actually test this experimentally. Finding some prediction that differs from standard physics that we could potentially measure.
That's always the million-dollar question in theoretical physics, isn't it? Experimental validation.
Always. That's what ultimately separates compelling ideas from accepted science.
Okay. So there we have it. We've taken quite a journey into Dr. Melvin Vopson's work, this really fascinating possibility that gravity, this everyday force, might actually be a signpost pointing towards a deeper computational reality. A universe driven by reducing its own information entropy.
It definitely makes you think differently about just standing here feeling the pull of the earth, doesn't it?
That really, really does. And it kind of leaves you, the listener, with this pretty wild thought to chew on. Could the very force that anchors us, that shapes galaxies, also be, I don't know, subtle evidence? Evidence that maybe we're part of something far more complex, maybe even simulated than we usually imagine.
Could the universe be constantly optimizing itself? Like this immense ongoing computation playing out all around us.
It's a perspective that certainly challenges how we think about reality, our place in it all.
Absolutely. A real mind bender.
So we definitely encourage you to mull over these ideas. Think about what they might mean for your own understanding of the cosmos. And hey, if this deep dive has piqued your interest, there's so much more to explore out there. The simulation hypothesis itself, the weirdness of entropy, the huge quest for quantum gravity. Lots to dig into.